The Dominican Republic is being sabotaged by the United States, at least per Marco Rubio. Check out this reel about El Salvador, but he tosses in the Dominican Republic here. Check this out.
I just got back from a 2-day visit, official visit to El Salvador. El Salvador was one of the most dangerous countries in the world up until very recently. It was a place that one of the leading murder capitals of the world. It was a place where everybody lived in terror of MS-13 and the other street gangs. Everybody was paying extortion money to these gangs, where these gangs were not just killing people, they were dismembering bodies, where people were illegally leaving the country in droves. I met someone who talked to me about how they had to leave El Salvador because they wouldn't pay the extortion money, so they killed one of their sons and they left before they killed the other son. It was a place that was in a lot of trouble. They elect a new president, Nayib Bukele, and he takes office and he gets the legislative branch to give him special powers for a special period, for a limited time, and he uses it to go out and round up all the gang members and put 30 or 40,000 of them in jail. And guess what? All of a sudden, the crime rate has plummeted. All of a sudden, the murder rate has plummeted. All of a sudden, for the first time in decades, people can go out at night. All of a sudden, for the first time in decades, people don't have to pay extortion money to a gang anymore. So how has the Biden administration reacted to this? By bad-mouthing the guy, by sanctioning people in the government, by going after them because they're being too tough and too harsh and so forth. And on top of everything else, this is a guy who's tried to be friendly and an ally to the United States. And we have a problem in our foreign policy. We treat our enemies better than we treat our friends. So we have an administration that bends over backwards to try to accommodate Maduro, an administration that's afraid to do anything tough on Ortega in Nicaragua, on the regime in Cuba. But on the other hand, decides I'm going to crack down on El Salvador and sanction them and badmouth them and try to make them a global pariah. I'm going to crack down on other countries like the Dominican Republic, for example, that's facing some of the same challenges. These are countries that want to be allies and friendly to the United States, and we have an administration that decides we're going to treat our allies worse than we do our adversaries. It makes absolutely no sense.
Ooh, we're going to treat our allies worse than we do our adversaries. Now, look, he's a politician. This is political. What I wanted to know is, how true is this? How real is this? And even maybe more importantly, what changes, if anything at all, in a new administration with Trump coming into power in January of 2025? I went back and found the article Marco Rubio wrote for a publication down here in the Dominican Republic called Diario Libre. If I said that wrong, let me know down below. I'm working on the Spanish, people. I'm working on it. I gotta look it up. Diario Libre. That's right. Diario Libre. Anyway. In that article, one of the big things that he was making a point about was how the Biden administration has been putting pressure on the Dominican government to allow for the intake of illegal migrants from Haiti. Sounds familiar, happening up there for the last 4 years. There was like an election about it, I think, or something. I don't know. Probably a big deal in the United States. But more specifically, what Rubio is referring to is Amnesty International putting out this hit piece essentially saying that Dominican policy against Haitians is racist. Now, let me stop right there for 1 second. If you've been watching me for a little bit, you know that I absolutely freaking hate what Amnesty is doing with their little declaration that Dominican policy is racist. Here's where the people start bubbling up. The keyboard warriors.
You're saying there's no racism in the Dominican Republic? What do you know, gringo?
No. I'm not saying there's no racism in the Dominican Republic. There is racism everywhere in the world, including here. However, is the policy of protecting the border against a culture that is not aligned with the culture here racist? No. Might there be some racist people on the ground or in government enforcing this? Sure. But the policy in and of itself is not racist. The policy is protect the border. And that to me is reasonable. In fact, it's essential. So, okay, Rubio goes out and says that the Dominican Republic is being sabotaged by the United States, that it's better to be an adversary than a friend, and that the Biden administration in particular is pushing the DR government to allow for this migration. He also praises President Abinader for not succumbing to that. In fact, there's been mass deportation back over to Haiti. I've seen it with my own 2 eyes. There's been aggressive moves to get people back over the border. I'm sure not all of it. In fact, I know not all of it is probably the most humane. And as human beings of the world, as people that are just born into these meat sacks wherever we may land in some country, across some border, it's sad to see any human being just being rounded up and transferred away. But that's just what it is. Countries have borders. The question is, how true is this? And again, what changes, if anything? So I did a little bit more digging and diving onto what is the What is the posture of the United States to the Dominican Republic? What can I kind of tell? Like putting tea leaves together, which if you follow me, you know I love tea leaves and I'm gonna put some together. And I came up with some really interesting takeaways. Things, I'll be honest with you, I didn't know. Now, if this is making you a little bit tired, I want to talk about today's sponsor, which is Colchones Naco, an amazing mattress company here in the Dominican Republic with stores in Santo Domingo, in Punta Cana, and in Santiago. Our beds that we purchased for our home, including that one right there, are from Colchones Naco. And right now, if you go to their store or if you go online to colchonesnaco.com, put it right there. We'll say it right there, colchonesnaco.com, and you enter or state the code El Gringo 24. Just say that to them or put it into the website. Whenever you order something, you'll get 2 free pillows courtesy of the Gringo. And I want to thank Colchones Naco for all their support and their sponsorship. Last thing, subscribe. 65% of people watching this aren't subscribed. Like, hit the subscribe button. I'm not a good looking dude. This gives me an ego boost just right there. Just tap. It'll make me feel good. I appreciate it. All right, so the Amnesty article, Dominican is racist. Biden administration is forcing or pushing the Dominican government to intake Haitian migrants without question. Is there sabotage there? This was interesting. The Guardian published an article that says US warns its darker-skinned citizens of Dominican Republic's migrant crackdown. Now we're gonna get into the woo, because I don't know if you noticed or not. Maybe you haven't. I'm white. Very white. So there's gonna be a lot of people who don't think I should even talk about this topic or whatever, and I get it, but let me just explain. I 100% understand why that article is written, and I 100% understand why the US government would say, hey, down in DR, if you're dark-skinned, be careful. And here's why. I get pulled over on a regular basis at different checkpoints by the military, especially in the last couple of months because of the migration issue. As soon as I roll my window down, because we have dark windows, they send me on my way. I'm not the face they're looking for. I understand if you're a dark-skinned, especially darker-skinned American, then you might potentially be a little bit concerned about what is a Dominican military, Dominican police officer going to do. They're gonna ask any questions, they're just gonna drag you out of that car. And I've heard anecdotal stories, and some of you may have them, and I would love to hear them down below because this is an important thing for people to know about. I get this question, is it safe for a Black American to travel to DR? I get the anecdotal stories of being harassed, being pushed, being questioned because of being dark-skinned. At the same time, I was recently getting ready to go to Elias Pina, which is a border town right on the Haitian border, with my videographer, Eric. Gotta have a picture of him, we could put it up here. Eric's dark, and I actually asked him, like, dude, you sure you're, because this isn't like, just a nice highway there. Like, you're going through some checkpoints. We got to bring some cash to pay some people off along the way. Like, it's that kind of trip. And he's Black. Some asked me the first time they saw him in an Instagram post, like, is he Haitian? The answer is no, but he's dark-skinned. When I asked him, he laughed. He's like, I'm Dominican, man. I talk Dominican, I can show Dominican, I have no concerns. Yeah, they might stop me, they might ask, but I have zero concerns. Been there, back, no problem. I don't have any concerns. I've also met many Haitian Americans that come here to vacation and go out into the country and they travel around, they go to Las Terrenas. I've met, I'm gonna say maybe a half dozen. Now, I know this isn't every dark-skinned human being that's come. I know I'm talking about 6, 7, 8, 10 different interactions I've had, but they all indicate as well that they have zero issues and have had zero issues even when stopped. Again, that's not to say that there aren't issues, but when you layer on the idea of what Rubio is saying, that Biden and the Biden administration are leaning into this amnesty sort of position that DR policy is racist, and then on top of that, you're putting out there into the world, hey, Black Americans or Black people, be really careful traveling to DR. That's hard. I understand why they should and why they would, but at the same time, is there something there? Is there a little bit of political pressure there? I don't know. I'll let you decide, drop it down in the comments. I'm literally on the fence on this. I can't speak of the experience as a Black man. Some of you are gonna make that point. Go ahead, but I just gave it to you. Nor can I do it as a Black woman, although in the last 3 or 4 years, I might have been able to claim that maybe too soon. But anyway, that's point one that I wanted to dive into on what Rubio might be talking about. The second point that I noticed, and didn't know this at all either, is there's no US ambassador to the Dominican Republic. The last appointed ambassador was in the Trump administration. They vacated the post in 2021, been none since. There is something called like a charge de something, it sounds very French. Here it is. Chargé d'affaires, chargé, whatever. So there's somebody running the embassy down here, but if you dive in and figure out, like, what is this all about? What does it mean not to have an ambassador appointed? It might be more symbolic than real, but still, if I'm the Dominican government and I'm the Dominican people, I might be thinking like, hey, you know what, US, like, arm's length a little bit here. Here's what happened. There was an appointee at the beginning of the Biden administration who shortly thereafter was never confirmed and reappointed to the Bahamas, I believe. Might have been another island, but it was another Caribbean tropical place, like DR, but not. And then nada. Nobody was appointed in their place. What it says, from what I've researched, to a government like the DR is,
hey, look, yeah, we're good, but we're not that good.
And also, an ambassadorship just takes on a level of status and pull and ability for DR to do more with the US government than the charge d'affaires, de fufa, flifla. That thing. Not the person. I think it's a woman, so I don't want to you called her a thing? No, I mean the position, whatever the position is. That position thing can handle routine diplomacy, but it doesn't have the pull and the influence of a full ambassadorship. So for DR, it feels like neglect, like lack of care, perhaps, for the relationship. And I don't know, it sort of goes to support maybe what Rubio is trying to say, which is, hey, look, if we're a partner nation, if we are a strategic trade partner, if we're the crown jewel, which we are, of the Caribbean down here in the Dominican Republic, and of really Latin America at this point, other than along with some other countries, then where's the love? Where's the priority? Now, with Trump coming in, I look at it as what are two impacts potentially based on policy that he's articulated now and his status and or position with the Dominican Republic in the past. So let's start with this. What about his deportation policy under his new border hawk and what they're going to be doing? Is the DR about to see an influx of migrants back to DR from the United States? Not likely. There's about estimated 150 to 180,000 Dominicans in the United States that are undocumented. The priority that's been placed is on criminal deportations. That doesn't mean that in the future there may not be more deportations, and some might debate and argue, well, entering the country is criminal, but they mean actual criminal acts. And there's just very little data to suggest that of the 150, 180,000 Dominicans living undocumented in the United States, that there's a large swath of criminals there. Dominicans don't hate, man. They're good people. But either way, the likelihood of 156, 160, 200,000, whatever it is, Dominicans all being repatriated in the next 3 or 4 years is very, very low. Those that do get sent back, I'm sure will be given due process, to whatever extent that means here, and placed in custody, jail, or whatever it might be. Some of you are not going to believe that, but the government here is cracking down on criminality more than probably ever before. So for those that feel as though Trump's crackdown on illegal immigration is going to create an influx of people back into DR, an influx that can't be handled, completely disagree with that. I can't be sold on that point. I see very little, if any, impact on Trump's migration policies, Trump's deportation policies on the Dominican Republic in a negative way. The second is, does he assign the ambassador? Does he open up better relations with DR? The indications from his first administration seem to be yes, but I can't sit on that hill. I'm not putting money on it. I think there will be an ambassador. I think there will be bilateral relations. And one thing that Trump really, really loves is partnering with countries where US has a trade surplus. DR is in a trade deficit to the United States, not the other way around. Trump hates trade deficits when the US is in a trade deficit, but he loves him some surplus, and that's what he has here. The one thing I can see is there is a South America Dominican Republic trade agreement with the United States, and another thing Trump hates is multilateral trade agreements. He likes unilateral, one-to-one. He likes a trade agreement with this country, a trade agreement with that country. So he might tear up that agreement. I don't know the impact of that per se, and may want to redo an agreement directly with DR. I don't think that's a negative or positive. I think it just is. If anything, honestly, it might be a positive because it'll be more strategically direct with DR. But the big chip, no pun intended, that the DR can bargain with here is microchip production. That to me is the crown jewel. And honestly, it really doesn't matter which administration. Both Biden or Harris or Trump, all three, have major interest in getting microchip production away from China and back onto this side of the planet, into the Western Hemisphere. And they're looking at countries like Costa Rica and Mexico and the Dominican Republic as potential partners in the development of microchips and semiconductors. Avani Dare, the president of the Dominican Republic, in July, I think it was, put out like a national decree of priority around microchip development in country. And these trade-free zones, like right here in Punta Cana and other parts of the country, are becoming sort of set up for that technological investment. There's a lot of action going on with microchip development. And to me, Trump, Harris, Biden, Jill Stein, whomever, I think that you're going to see that as the major play on relations between the US and DR. But either way, an assignment of an ambassador and not pressuring this country on having to take in illegal migrants, those two things I think create less tension between countries and give DR a leg up. So that's my take. I think DR is well positioned. I think they're actually going to be in a better position going forward. Marginally, microchip production is the big takeoff, ready for launch moment if it happens between the US and DR. And we'll see. An assignment of an ambassador might be a really cool thing to see just to show DR from the US like, hey, we're buddies, we're with you, let's get this going. If you want to know more about the microchip thing, I dug deep on this. You can click it right here and I'll go all in on all aspects of microchip production and how it's a game changer, and I'll see you all on the next video. Happy holidays.